Hi there, I'm Michael Dembro, and I represent District 23 in the Oregon Senate. It's much of Northeast and Southeast Portland. I also chair the Committee on Education for the Senate. And many of you may know that for years before I came into the legislature, I was a union president for our faculty at Portland Community College. And I've been involved in a number of disputes. And I think what has brought us to a point where teachers are out on strike is a sense of distrust between the parties, a sense among the teachers that they are not respected. Fortunately, in my time as a union president, we were able to move to an interest-based approach to negotiations. This one is unfortunately very different, and the two sides are still having difficulty agreeing on the basic costs of this proposal. But I will say that the overwhelming support for this strike among the teachers is a sign that they are feeling disrespected. That's what drives a unit to do this. I've been encouraged in recent days to see reports of more willingness on the part of Portland Public Schools to engage meaningfully with PAT's concerns. The board members have been somewhat more engaged, and this engagement is crucial to addressing teachers' long-standing sense of not being heard. Something that we started hearing many months ago. But I will say just most recently, I've heard that maybe yesterday's negotiations took a turn in the wrong direction, and I'm hoping that that can turn around. As you may know, a group of us Portland area legislators called on the school board to engage more directly in these negotiations, to have a few of them at least be at the table, meeting directly with teachers. And the reason that that would be helpful, to have some board members at the table and hearing directly from the teachers, is the perception that what's at the heart of this impasse is a lack of trust between the parties. Though I'm sure that the management team might disagree, the teachers do not feel that their concerns are being heard. When that happens, in my experience, the only way to cut through that is to have the principals there at the table, meeting directly to hear the concerns and to have the one-on-one conversations that are needed. Last week and maybe the week before, we started hearing from the district that the problem here was that the legislature did not appropriate what the district needed in the last session. We, in the letter that we sent the district, pushed back against that because that is really a misunderstanding of what happened last year. We heard as late spring from the district, from the superintendent, that what they needed was $10.3 billion. And at the end of the day, that's what we were able to provide. And if you have any questions about that, we have our co-chairs here who can tell you more about that. But in addition to meeting what they said that was needed, we were on top of that able to put an additional $100+ million for early literacy. We were able to fund Senate Bill 283, which supports educators, addresses the educator workforce challenges. More money went into the Student Success Act on top of our meeting that basic demand. We do expect the district and the union to work with that allocation and strike a deal That will, of course, involve hard compromises, as negotiations must, but ultimately leaves the teachers walking away from the table feeling respected. We've obviously heard calls from all sides that more work needs to be done to provide funding for public education, and I can tell you that we are working on that and continue to work on that. We are going to be looking at legislation in the short session to modernize our quality education model. Through Senate Bill 283, we have a task force in place that is looking at the challenges faced by substitute teachers. We have a task force that is underway looking at a statewide salary schedule for teachers. These are all very important conversations, and we look forward to the results of them. But in conclusion, I think we've heard from our community loud and clear that our teachers deserve respect, that their children need teachers who are doing their work and feeling respected, that they deserve this and the moon. And we're looking forward to a resolution to that. I do want to say that the district has made good decisions with the money that we've given them in certain respects, in terms of using Student Success Act dollars to reduce some class sizes in order to providing opportunities for summer learning to their students. They've also made some decisions that we do not think are in the best interest of students. All of that to say, at the end of this, we're hoping that as soon as possible a deal will be struck, but then there will need to be a lot more healing. And we, as legislators, I know, are committed to helping with that going forward. And so I look forward to any questions that you might have or any of the details around any of the work that we're doing. Thank you. And I'd like to call up my colleague, Travis Nelson from the House.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, everybody. My name is State Representative Travis Nelson, pronouns he, him, his, State Representative for House District 44, North and Northeast Portland. When I am not here in the legislature, I am a registered nurse and serve as a union rep and union negotiator on behalf of nurses. First, I'd like to thank the thousands of Oregon teachers who are taking a stand, not just for themselves, but for Oregon families and students. I'm a union member, and many of you here have seen me on the picket lines, including being on the line for Portland teachers. The right to bargain collectively for fair pay, good benefits, and better working conditions is essential. Teachers are the frontline workers that keep us going. They give our children an invaluable education and, in return, a brighter future. And I think that's where all of us, students, parents, the district, legislators, board members, educators, can all agree. We all want healthy and safe schools where our kids can thrive. As a legislature, we have led with those values and earlier this year passed the largest K-12 budget in Oregon history based on what education experts, including PPS, asked for on the record. Making our schools stronger has been and will continue to be a top priority for us. I want to recognize that we know that in the long run, we need to work together to find sustainable ways to strengthen school funding at every single level. No one is denying that. We welcome PPS to join the effort to find better and more stable funding for our schools. This isn't something that legislators can solve on our own. Solving this problem is going to take a conversation that includes leaders and community members across the entire state, an inclusive and democratic process. In other words, this will take a lot of time, hard work, and dedication, and if we have a broad coalition of support, I know that we will be up to the task. But what's happening right now is not about the long term. It is about taking swift and immediate action to get our kids back to school. We know the resources are there to show Portland teachers, students, and families that they are valued, to improve working conditions and find an agreement that works for both parties. It is now on PPS to show up, respect our teachers, negotiate in good faith, and make that happen. And I'll hand the mic back over to Hannah and Tess. Thank you all so much.
The line, and then time allowing, I will go to folks on the phone, unless Senator Steiner.
No, I'm just standing here so that when people have questions, because you told me to.
Fabulous.
Following instructions. Question.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a question on everyone's mind is why can't the state just step in and give more money?
That actually is a question for me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Steiner, State Senate District 17, and I'm the Senate co-chair, along with my colleague, Representative Sanchez, of the Joint Committee on Ways and Means. Oregon made a decision in 1990 with ballot measure 5 about how we were going to fund K-12 education. It is a uniform pot of money that, in combination with local property taxes, means that for every child in the K-12 system, there is a base level of funding that is identical from district to district. It is not one where we go in and we say Portland Public gets this much and Monmouth gets that much and Salem-Keizer gets this much. We provide an amount that gets each school to an identical amount of funding per student based on formulas, and then it's up to the districts to figure that out. So we cannot, never have, shouldn't, probably can't statutorily or constitutionally go in and give any one district extra funds.
So then going off that, knowing that you met what the superintendent for PPS wanted back during the regular session, hearing the blame essentially be put on the state legislature, as representatives, I just kind of want to hear your reaction to that.
It's frustrating. As others have mentioned, they've been in negotiations for the better part of a year. So when Superintendent Guerrero testified in front of the legislature that we should fund at $10.3 billion, which we did, it feels a little disingenuous to have them come back and say, actually, we can't do it because you didn't give us enough money. So I don't care to comment anymore about that, but I'm a little frustrated because we did everything that the schools asked us for and then some. It was the school boards, it was the superintendents, it was the Oregon Education Association, it was OSEA, it was parent advocates. Every single one of those groups came in asking us for $10.3 billion. And for the first time in my career, we gave them $10.3 billion. We gave them what they asked for. I have never, and I don't know, Senator Denbrough's been here even longer than I don't think we've ever been able to do that before. And I was thrilled to get to that number. And as he mentioned also, to add on with the money for early literacy, with the increased amounts that came through the student investment accounts, with the increased CAT revenues. I'm delighted by how much money went into K-12 education. Is it enough in the long term? Maybe not, but that's a separate conversation.
If you have parents that are caught in the middle of all this standing in front of you, what would you want to say to them right now?
I would say I'm really sorry the district isn't stepping up and the board isn't stepping up to do what they're required to do, which is to ensure that they come to the table in good faith, especially the board. They need to be there at the table talking to teachers instead of just being in the building and only talking to the district. They have to talk to both. They have to hear from teachers who are on the front lines every day. And it's the parents and the kids who are getting caught in the middle of this. And the teachers are trying hard to bargain in good faith. The district needs to as well, and that means the board.
Then going forward, if bargaining still continues up maybe even to Thanksgiving, should the governor herself step in and try to mediate?
I can't really comment on that. That's up to the governor.
Just going off of how you were saying we can't give a special amount of money, single out Portland. Have other districts been reaching out with similar issues as Portland?
Not to the best of my knowledge. In fact, I had districts coming to me during sessions saying they'd be fine if we were funded it at $9.8 billion. And instead we funded it at $10.3 billion. So I think the vast majority of districts are doing really well. I can't comment on any specific district, but I haven't heard from any other ones saying they're having problems.
The question I have in regards to the letter that was written to Portland Public Schools and the numbers and the comparisons that were given regarding Portland Public School District and others in terms of how the money is being spent. Are there any regulatory processes in place to ensure that money is being spent adequately or correctly?
So if I could, I think this is another challenge that we have, and we see this in other parts of state government. The state is required to use general fund to pay for a wide variety of services, including K-12 education. Those services are actually delivered by other entities at different levels of government. We give money on a formula, as I mentioned earlier, to school districts based on how many students are there, and it is their job to deliver on that promise of education, of high quality education. Our teachers are doing their best day in and day out to do that. We have provided historic levels of funding, and it's the district's responsibility to meet that.
All right, we're gonna go to the chat. Julia Silverman with the Oregonian, you're up first.
Thank you very much. I have two questions. My first is for Senator Steiner Hayward, and my second is for Jack.
Steiner.
So first, as you know, the current service level funding was based on an estimate of raises for teachers of 2.5% for this year and 2.56% for next year. Do you all really believe that is sufficient to cover inflation, especially considering that state employees received a 6.5% COLA for this year and next?
The original CSL we had as a state was $9.6 billion based on our calculations. That's where that 2.5%, but 10.3 is much higher than that.
Yes, but it's the State Department of Education budgeted 2.5% raises, which was factored into the CSL. I'm asking.
Well, that's the CSL, and we came in $700 million above CSL
Yeah.
by our calculation.
Yeah, that's actually when it was at 9.2%, the original.
The original one.
At
So,
9.2 billion.
well, no, that 9.2 was last biennium, and 9.6 was current CSL, and we went to 9.8, and then we went to 10.3. So that budget was where we were going with 9.6 as CSL, but what we gave was 10.3.
My second question is for Jackie. Jackie, I'm wondering if you could address whether PFT via OEA is prepared to assume the cost of members' health benefits if the strike continues past November 15th.
Yes, I believe OEA will cover us there. I also think there's some confusion around how healthcare benefits are factored in with Portland Public Schools. So essentially there is the mid-month from the previous month, so like October 15th through November 16th pay period would then provide educators with their December health insurance. So I'm not sure that that is really a factor that we need to worry about right now, but I am confident that the OEA will take care of it if necessary.
All right, next up we have Helen Young.
Thanks very much. This question is for Senator Steiner. You were saying, or I believe I saw in a story, that you believe the district has the money to address teachers' needs. Do you believe that, or can you go through where in PPS's budget you think is enough money to cover the 8.5, 7%, 6% cost of living increases, as well as the class caps and the planning time?
I don't think I ever said explicitly, or if I did, it was perhaps taken out of context, that I know for a fact that the district has the money. What I have said and will continue to say is that I think the district needs to look hard at whether they added positions or programs with one-time funds that have turned into ongoing expenses and are now spending money and expecting us to the state to make up for it, and instead of offering reasonable raises. I also didn't specifically comment on the percentage of the raises because that's a subject of negotiation. What I do think is that teachers need to be compensated fairly, and that many of the other teacher demands, simple health and safety things like temperature in the classroom so that kids can learn and be safe and healthy and teachers can learn. We've passed requirements for workers who are outdoors to keep them safe from the heat. Why in the world shouldn't teachers and students be protected in the same way?
So do you think that one-time programs, for instance, post-pandemic, should be discontinued in order to put that money toward teacher salaries?
It's impossible for me to comment on that as in a generic way, Helen. There are so many different factors that go into this. It is not the legislature's job to micromanage school districts. It is our job to provide funding that we believe is the best we can possibly do given our other constraints on our budget, which we did. And it's now the district's job to prioritize the most important resource they have, which is our teachers.
All right, we have time for one last question. We have time for one last question. Excuse me, I want to make sure that we get to Alex Baumhart's question. Jackie, you said in the past 2 weeks, Portland educators have pointed to $125 billion available in funding that the district could use to help bridge the gap between proposals, and the district bargaining team has still refused to move an inch. What did the district leaders / negotiators say to union leaders when they declined to use any of this money in pursuit of a compromise?
I mean, they just continue to keep saying they don't have the money, and we're not going to accept that answer. We think our students are worth it.
Oh, I think we lost audio. Jackie, could you repeat your answer?
Yeah, I cannot speak about specific items at the bargaining table because I am not a part of the bargaining team. However, I believe that the funding is there. There is an additional $20 million every year that is not being included in the PPS budget in the forecast that they're looking at, and there's also $100 million in reserves. So we are not asking them to use all of that reserves, but I think it's a healthy estimate to say there's around 100 or 120 million that they could essentially use right now.
All right, thank you everybody so much. It's 11:30 and our legislators need to get to their committee meetings. Really appreciate all of your participation. If we didn't get to your question today, I see a couple in the chat I'll be making note of. And please feel free to follow up with Hannah or I. Our contact information was on the media advisory, and we will try and get you answers later today. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning for an update on negotiations with our teachers union. Today represents the third day our students are not in class, and we want to share with you our efforts aimed at getting them back to school. Our bargaining team worked hard throughout the weekend, with school board members joining us in caucus at various points. I appreciate their continued in-person involvement and direction to bring a speedy resolution to contract negotiations and to get our kids back in school. As our school board understands, we have the responsibility to foster a school system that serves its students by both providing a high-quality educational program as well as operating a fiscally responsible organization. K-12 districts across Oregon advocated for the allocation of funds to support, at minimum, the current service level. That is true. With statewide advocacy, this was accomplished. Thank you to our legislators. However, making further investments, like in our workforce, now requires either increased revenue or dramatic budget reductions. Portland Public Schools has demonstrated its ability to effectively invest in areas that address the academic, mental, and behavioral health needs of our children. And it's among one of the few examples of where student outcomes are outpacing state averages. And we can continue to support our students to thrive only through the dedicated work of our educators. And I've said it again and again, our financial decisions to prioritize high-quality teaching and learning will remain at the forefront. We'll protect our direct student services and our school supports to the maximum extent possible. Students' success will always be our highest priority, and our proposals to PAT attempt to preserve that commitment. But we do have a fixed level of resources, and the proposals to date reflect our fixed and insufficient means. We're stuck within those means. Over the last week, people have called on our district to make budget cuts. That's been our reality since we began bargaining in January. Each package that we have offered to PAT since we started bargaining in January would require us to make cuts. The question is just how much and from where. With our current proposal, PPS will be required to make $51 million in budget reductions over the next 3 years, and it will require the use of our one-time reserves, bringing us down to the 5% minimum required by our board policy. And this is what I want our community to hear, so I'm going to say it again. Our current proposal will require PPS to make $51 million in cuts over the next 3 years. It'll require the one-time reserves being used, bringing us down to our minimum. Already, we have begun to contemplate what those reductions might look like, beginning with the central office administration taking a hard look at where it needs to make reductions. So once again, we're entering this week of talks. We hope to have positive negotiations starting this afternoon. We know that we're going to have to continue to listen and make compromises and propose solutions that will meet our educator workforce needs. Some of those areas which we spent some time on this weekend include the desire to provide relief to our educators in the way of planning and preparation time. I felt like we had some good conversations about what that might look like. We hope to be able to continue those conversations. And we're going to be taking some questions, but we're committed to staying at the table, continuing to bargain every single day. The mediator has already scheduled to bring us together this afternoon through the evening as well as this weekend, and we'll continue to reconvene through the week and the weekend if necessary, whatever it takes to arrive at a resolution and get our children back in school. So they deserve to be in class. At the same time, our teachers deserve fair employment terms, but our community also deserves a sustainable contract that balances all of our students' many needs. So here with me today to help with any questions you may have, responses, our Deputy Superintendent Dr. Cheryl Proctor, and Chief Dr. Renard Adams here with me this morning.
Superintendent, what happens if you get to the point where you just say, okay, we'll do this, we'll give you what you want, and then essentially the punishment becomes, here's all the cuts to all these other groups, in other words, other employee groups, cutting days, closing schools?
Sure. Well, let's look at the framing of your question. There are many areas that are important to our Portland Association of Teachers. We would argue they're important to us as well. We have finite resources, so we can do more in one area and a little less in some other areas, or we can do a little bit in all the areas. What we can't do is turn up the dials in every area, because that's simply not viable. That's to answer the first part of your question. The second part of your question?
In other words, if you go ahead and give them the salaries increases that they're looking for, and then turn around and make cuts to days, to other programs,
Right.
to other packages. In other words, at that point, don't you just sort of pass the buck?
Our interest is to make sure that Portland Public Schools is the employer of choice for all of our labor groups, and we have multiple labor groups with which we are in negotiations with. We have to ensure that we're taking care of all of them. It is true that in order to afford that, you remember the current service level that we were allocated takes care of the current service level. If you want to do more, then you need either more revenue or you need to make budget reductions. Now, the majority of our expenses go into serving students and supporting our school communities. The central office is 5% of the overall budget, so you could eliminate the central office entirely. You still have a big problem there. So it is true. It would need to come from those other areas, and that's where we are torn with striking a balance, because what I'm not willing to do is give up our students quality school experience. I think we all think our students should receive a well-rounded education. I think they should all have arts and library and extracurriculars and athletics. And so there's a balance of making sure our students have a positive, well-supported experience, and at the same time making sure that our employees are valued and compensated at a level that we can viably provide.
Does the teacher union have access to these same numbers that you see? Are they seeing something different?
We have been as transparent as possible from the beginning, both from our budget development last spring. We've continued to publish. You can find those on our website, the financials. We think part of the problem is that there doesn't seem to be still agreement on how big the pie actually is. And so I think until we have clarity there, which we've attempted to provide through multiple meetings with PAT, then you could understand why they're asking at a level that isn't viable, and we're living with the reality and the understanding of what resources we actually have available.
Then why is it they see the pie being bigger than you see the pie being bigger?
Well, that's a good question for them.
Superintendent, an October 23rd email to the teachers says that teachers who choose not to strike will be able to work and get paid. This sounds like an incentive not to strike to me. Can you explain?
Well, we respect our Teachers Association right to strike, to take collective bargaining action. There are some members who individually perhaps feel differently, who want to continue to serve children at this time, and as an employer, that avenue is available to them.
An email was also sent to coaches saying if you choose to strike, you will be unable to coach a fall or winter sport, whereas the district previously said that fall and winter sports would not be interrupted by this strike. That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. I'd have to look at the text. What we didn't want to do is interrupt our students' fall season championship games and wrapping up their athletic season.
So no, it says here you may not continue to work as an athletics coach if you are a PAT educator who chooses to strike. So does this mean these athletic coaches who are striking are going to be let go from their positions?
Yeah, I don't have an exact question for you at this time.
Okay. Also, I have one more question. So I just have one more question. It's a question I think a lot of people have. So multiple legislators, including the one speaking today, said that in March you asked the legislature for $10.3 billion to fund public schools. They passed $10.2 billion, and now they're saying now you're asking for more, whereas the other school districts are making do with this amount. What is your response to the people saying the state gave you what you asked for, and now you're asking for more?
Because I think memories are short, it is true that myself, as well as superintendents and districts up and down the state of Oregon, early in the budget development process at the State House, we saw an allocation of state school fund at the time that seemed really inadequate. our advocacy was aimed at a minimum, you've got to get us to the current service level. We're glad that that was heard and listened to, and that the legislature arrived at that current service level, and we're thankful for it, and that's appreciated. We also advocated in other areas that we're pleased that legislators also saw as important, like early literacy, for instance, which has been a big focus here at Portland, and I think created a demonstration of what's possible there. That's the current service level, right? And so this has been our point all along. Nothing's staying current, including the desires of our teachers who want to raise. So in order to afford that, it requires more revenue or budget reductions. And I get it, the message is work within our means, but our means then is going to mean cuts, dramatic at some point, in order to afford compensation increases for any one of our labor groups. And therein lies the challenge.
I wanted to ask about a couple of financial allegations that have come up in the last week. One from the legislators in the letter who said that PPS spends less in the classroom and more on administrators than similar districts. And then two, the PAT statement yesterday that said that they have pointed to $125 million in untapped funding that could be used to bridge the gap. So just want to ask your response on both
Sure.
of those.
I don't know what that last part refers to, but it's true when you look at our operation that there's probably a few percentage points that we invest a little bit more in a centrally managed way. It doesn't necessarily go into a bunch of high-level managers. We as a district believe we play a role as an organization to support school improvement at scale. So you see coordinators, instructional coach network leaders, you see a lot of folks who are in the field every single day supporting the needs across the school portfolio. I would also, argue that, well, what is the appropriate level of central office support to schools that will allow you to continue seeing improvements in the outcomes of our students? Maybe we spent a little bit more centrally supporting schools directly, but I think we're one of the districts who also demonstrated a counter narrative to how students are doing across the state, where there needs to be a lot of work. So I think I would invite a dialogue around how school systems are using their resources to advance student outcomes, particularly students of color.
And maybe Bernard on that second part. So despite Portland educators pointing to $125 million in untapped funding that could be used to help bridge the gap between both sides' proposals, did that come up over the weekend at all?
It is not. I don't know if they're talking about the totality of our fund balance, which we know we can't spend to zero. I'm not sure. Part of the challenge we're facing is there's not agreement on the numbers, right? And so I'm not sure where those numbers are coming from. Excuse me. We've repeatedly asked them to show us what areas they would propose we cut in order to make the investments that they're asking for. And so far, we've not gotten concrete answers. We continue to hear the money is there, and that just simply isn't concrete enough for us to identify where we could make reductions or redirections in order to meet their needs.
So, Dr. Adams, about the budget. You've repeatedly said, and it seems clear from their statements, that the two sides don't agree on the fundamental math. What precisely is being done to address the fact that the two sides don't agree on math?
Well, what we've done for our part is we've met with them, I believe, 4 times in whole group and small group with our budget experts and their budget experts. We're trying to be as transparent as we can and open our books and show them the numbers that we're looking at.
You've done that recently?
I would have to get back with you, Julia, on the last date. It has not been in the last 3 weeks, so to say, but it has been within the last 6 weeks.
Thanks, everyone. Quickly, I got a question, I wasn't able to ask one. So we were hearing that the education committee chair this morning said yesterday's negotiations took a turn in the wrong direction. Can you speak to that, and can you speak to some of the progress that you've made over the weekend when it comes to art?
Sure. I could give a description of how the weekend sort of went, right? On Saturday, we spent some time, the mediator is calling us into small groups with different subject matter experts around the topics that continue to come up. Class size, workload relief, and the like, student safety, discipline, and things like that. On Saturday, we heard a lot from PAT. We then went back to our caucus room and started making proposals, proposed languages, ideas that we could throw around. We thought there was some agreement around that, and then on Sunday, when we had those follow-up conversations, there was not an acknowledgement, I would say, on the PAT side that we met what we had agreed to or thought we had decided that we thought was agreeable language. Dr. Proctor could probably say a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. And as an example, we heard from our PAT bargaining team that teacher planning time was an area of priority for them. And so the district bargaining team focused on exploring certain strategies that could help to relieve that area. And we discussed with the PAT bargaining team elements of their proposal, which included concepts like adding an additional professional development day to the calendar so that teachers go from a 192 calendar day to a 193 calendar day. Their proposal also included increasing educators' workday to 8 hours, while at the same time increasing 15 minutes of student instructional day. This move will then bank time that we could use for professional development opportunities that they are actually asking for. It also included reducing the number and length of staff meetings that were once required, that are required for teachers, reducing that from 30 staff meetings a day to 30 staff meetings, a year, to 10 staff meetings a year, allowing for us to build back in more teacher planning time. Decreasing administratively directed time to increase and maximize teacher planning and preparation. And so after building a model aligned to meet some of these key concepts to their proposal, we now understand that their desire was for 2 additional teacher-directed planning days, which would eliminate student instructional days. And so PPS bargaining team plans to review the model. However, it's important to say that as a district, we value student instructional time as a mechanism to improve student achievement and learning outcomes, countering the effects that we saw with the recent pandemic. And so while we recognize the need to come to an agreement, we will go back and we will revisit the model. However, we also recognize that the potential impacts of this strike on student learning is really great. And we don't want to see that those impacts increase anymore. So we will come together and again, work diligently and stay at the table until we could find a mutual agreement.
So, you said professional development days, but isn't what the teachers are asking for planning? Those are quite different.
Absolutely.
So why offer them an extra PD day when what they're seeking is an extra planning day?
Okay, thank you for that question. And so what's important to understand is that in our bargaining packages, we have over 31 articles that we have to address. And each of these articles have cost components associated with them. And some of these articles have required PD, required climate and culture days that we have to, by contract, provide to teachers. So what we found in the initial proposal was that it eliminated that PD time. And so what we can't do is put ourselves in jeopardy with violating the contract off the bat by completely eliminating professional development time.
So just as a closing statement, we heard one earlier this morning around how well the children in Oregon are doing. I want to dispel any notions that what we have here is an issue of mismanagement. We'll continue to make transparent the critical analysis we are doing both financially around all the efforts we are making to try to focus and concentrate our resources where they matter most, impacting our students. But I want to make sure everybody's clear. Portland Public Schools is first out of the gate here with a major bargaining with one of its labor groups. I think, and I hate to foreshadow eerily here, you're going to see an increasing number of situations like ours happening up and down the state, unfortunately. So thank you everyone for your attention. We're going to thank you for your attention to this important matter. We're going to stay attentive to it as well. We'll be at the table again in just a couple of hours. Thank you.